Today on With the First Pick, we got 10 burning questions ahead of the college and NFL seasons. And to help me sort through it all, one of my favorite people on planet Earth, co-host of the Cover 3 podcast, Chip Patterson. I'm Ryan Wilson. This is episode 280. And Chip, you may not care, but there are 268 days until the 2026 NFL draft. But because this is the crossover pod you didn't know you needed, you might care about this. 25 days until the start of the college football season, 37 until the start of the 2025 NFL regular season. And in case you're wondering, Rand is on a well-deserved vacation with his fam. But more Chip Patterson in your life is never a bad thing. Chip, good to see you, buddy. How you doing, man?
Oh, man, I am fantastic. Whenever I get the tap to come join you here, it is a joy because whether we are, doing an instant reaction to Tua Tagovailoa being drafted and then trying to get both of our expertise, whether we're even not even being broadcast or we're just discussing some of these players going into or coming out of a college football season, I've been working with you for a long time. So to bring these conversations to the people and to your audience, I'm more than happy to do it.
Producer Striker's with us today. Striker, I've been with Chip so long that I knew when he had dark hair, he knew when I had a little bit of hair. And we used to go to Radio City and cover the draft live and in person for CBSSports.com and update the draft tracker. And that was before I started doing the draft. And I think Chip actually asked to get taken off that assignment because I would literally ask you about every single player that was drafted by the Steelers. Is this guy good? Is that guy good? But now the draft is bigger than us and we get to cover from different angles. But I love talking to you, Chip, because number one, it's basically like you're the kindergarten through high school teacher and you've seen these kids throughout, and then I get them in college and they graduate on to become adults. So we get both halves of the equation, and we're going to do this I think it's going to be interesting because you're going to give us 5 burning questions from the perspective of what you guys do at Cover 3. And if you're not watching or following Cover 3, you should. They just came back from SEC Media Days, which is fantastic. They just did the show prior to this. So if you need another 53 minutes to chip in your life, you're in the exact right place. And then I'll give you 5 burning questions looking at the guys who just were drafted into the NFL and what they may look like as their rookie seasons unfold. And you'll have plenty to say about that because you know these guys as well, if not better than I do. But let's get this thing started. First things first, and I saw this, and I heard you and Bud and Danny mention this in passing in the previous hour, but I'm curious because I have no idea that this is even a talking point because it makes me very, in part, happy and in part surprised. And your first burning question, Chip, are we sure Jeremiah Smith, J.J. Smith, the all-world wide receiver at Ohio State, isn't going to be draft eligible in 2026?
Like, are we sure? Are we positive? I mean, I look at this fully formed football player who continues to match everything you would want from a maturity level with the fine-tuned route running, with the incredible athletic upside. We had Ryan Day visit the Cover 3 podcast, getting to sit in a room with him and look at him and even ask the question, just how special is Jeremiah Smith? And he even had to take a pause and gather himself, Ryan, before he could talk about just every now and then he does something in practice that just blows your mind. You just do not think the human body can make some of the catches that he is able to make. And so I believe that you've even weighed in on where Jeremiah Smith would have been in the 2025 NFL draft. And in the 2026 NFL draft, he will likely not be there. But for my money, pound for pound, Jeremiah Smith might be the best capital F football player at any possession at the college level, and yet he is still a year out. So I know that your audience is mostly already looking ahead to 2026, but I will say that covering the college game, I don't know if there's anybody who's more pro-ready for Sundays than the true sophomore wide receiver at Ohio State.
No arguments here. He would have been the first wide receiver taken in 2025, 2024, 2023, maybe going back to when Jamar Chase was drafted first as the 5th overall pick, I believe. The other thing is this. So I was at the Ohio State Pro Day seeing all the other guys that were drafted, and Jeremiah was there in sweats. I was surprised he didn't look bigger. Marvin Harrison Jr. was also there, and Marvin is getting a lot of news for gaining some weight, good weight, and getting a little thicker and being a little stronger. And I thought Jeremiah looked to be about the same size as Marvin, maybe not quite as tall. But when you see him in pads, he looks like a defensive end. And that's the thing that takes your breath away. I remember talking to Will Howard at the Combine back in the spring. And I said, what's it like throwing passes to Jeremiah Smith? Like when you first got in the practice field with him. And he's like, look, you just throw it up and you don't have to worry about much. Like, he's going to come down with it, or it's going to, on the off chance be an incompletion. That's the worst thing that could happen. But I'm with you. I think he is incredibly dynamic. To your point, he's a great kid by all accounts. I know our buddy Rick Spielman spent some time with him when he worked with the Ohio State kids before he went back into the league, and had nothing but glowing things to say about him. So, it makes some sense that it seems like, given that how mature he is physically, the next logical step would be NFL sooner rather than later. But we'll see. We'll see what the higher-ups say about that. All right, here's my burning question, Chip, and that was a good one that you got to start off there with. Here's a guy who developmentally never reached the height, shall we say, of Jeremiah Smith, but I think you would agree that what he did the last year and a half in college solidified his spot as the number 6 overall pick. How quickly can Ashton Jeanty out of Boise State, taken by the Raiders, save that run game in Las Vegas? And then, of course, two of my favorite players in the draft class, Jack Besh out of TCU, and then Dante Thornton out of Tennessee, wide receivers drafted in the 2nd and 4th round. How quickly can they help that wide receiver room? Early reports out of training camp is that Jacoby Myers is still wide receiver 1 for Geno Smith, and I understand that. Jacoby's been had a fantastic career both in New England and in Las Vegas. But Ashton Jeanty, and Chip, I don't know how closely on Sundays you're following the Las Vegas Raiders, but I'll just let you know, pick any running back category that you can come up with, true or not, and the Raiders almost certainly finished last or near last season. Ashton Jeanty solved a lot of those problems. Also solving a lot of those problems, I want to get your thoughts on this. Chip Kelly, because Chip Kelly does a lot of things. Mostly it starts with running the football, whether it's at New Hampshire, Oregon, in the league in Philadelphia and San Francisco, or even last year at Ohio State. They were the 2nd leading rush team in the Big Ten. Of course, they had those 2 running backs drafted in round 2. So what are your thoughts in general on what Chip Kelly is going to bring offensively, and just how you see someone like Ashton Jeanty, who is not built like Bijan Robinson, for example? What do you think that transition is going to look like once he gets to the next level here?
I think he hits the ground running, and I think he has to. I just think that you're dealing with a player who, the key number for me with Ashton Jeanty, and I thought this going into the NFL draft, and it's kind of a little bit of a too old school approach, but 594. That is the number of rushing attempts Ashton Jeanty has over the last 2 seasons. Tied for number 1 in the country with 374 last year, and 220 is nothing to sniff at. Probably about top 20 nationally in terms of rushing attempts. So, I mean, he is very prepared to carry a heavy load. But if you really believe in a certain magical or mythical number of rushing attempts where you start to see production wear off a little bit, that he has gotten a lot of work. It is going to be interesting to see, how they end up constructing a passing game around it, because what they do have with the Raiders is at least a more dynamic threats on the outside than what Boise State had. It can be a little bit more of not having to deal with the loaded box, because he does such a good job in terms of being able to get into the next level and make a guy miss. I think that you won't have to be dealing with as much at the next level as Boise State did, which faced so many 8-man boxes, so many just load up to do anything we can to stop Ashton Jeanty defensive approaches. But again, 594, that is the rushing attempts by Ashton Jeanty over the last 2 seasons. It is not a, hey, let's warm him up and then maybe he'll be ready. No, you draft him at that position because you expect that you can just drop him and he's going to hit the ground running like one of those Instagram workout guys that jumps out of a car and just starts running down the highway.
Chip with the deep cut from IG. All right. I love that. And let's take a break, because when we come back, it doesn't matter who the producer is, whether it's Stryker or Sharon. They're all Penn State alums, and they're going to have real questions about this next conversation. Your burning question has to do with Drew Allar, who may be controversial. We'll talk about it right after the break. All right, Chip, back here and with First Pick. On the last hour on the Cover 3 podcast, you and the guys did a Heisman Trophy draft, and Drew Allar's name came up. I think he was a 6th overall pick, according to producer Stryker. And I don't know if that's high or low, but your burning question, and it's an important one, and we were asking this last year with their new OC in Happy Valley. Can Drew Allar shine on Penn State's biggest stage? And I'll set you up with this. The complaints last year from Penn State fans, no one to throw the ball to. Well, outside of the Tyler Warren, who ended up being one of the best players in college football, but okay. They have 3 wide receivers coming in: Kyron Houston out of USC, Devonta Ross out of Troy, and my guy Trevor Pena out of Syracuse. Can Drew Allar, Chip, shine on Penn State's biggest stage?
I think he has to. I think that's why this is a question that burns. I think this is a question that does not have an answer and won't have an answer until, maybe like 3 to 4 games of the season, until you play Ohio State, until you get maybe to the Big Ten championship, until you get into the college football playoff, because for Drew Allar, you are set up in the framework of that Andy Kotelnicki offense to be able to hit some big explosive plays. You've got the advantages of having that two-headed monster of Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. And look, he might not be spectacular statistically or in terms of individual accolades or awards, as Penn State is just able to use, an older and mature team to kind of bowl over a lot of the opponents on their schedule. But I think back to the college football playoff semifinals against Notre Dame. And I think back to that ill-advised cross-body throw that turned out to be an interception near midfield that was part of Penn State blowing a lead and costing themselves a chance to go play for the national championship. And the thing that's so interesting, as you and I are talking right now, talked to center Nick Dawkins last week, talked to Drew Allar himself, talked to James Franklin, and I think that Nick Dawkins said it best. He said, there is so much pressure on Drew Allar. I promise you it is nothing compared to the pressure that he has on himself. He has been learning how to cook. He has been trying to slim down. He's down about 10 to 15 pounds. He wants to make mobility a part of his game so that the run is really a threat. I'm so impressed with him going into his 3rd year as a starter and the mentality that he has. But all that sounds good in July. Like, what happens when you get against Ohio State in the season? If you get into the Big Ten title game, if you get into the college football playoff, Drew Allar has the tools and talent to transcend to that next level and take those kind of games over. And so I'm very curious to see if we get it.
You bring up a really good point, because when you get an opportunity to, and both you and I are parents and have kids, and once you start talking to these kids, you like them if they're decent human beings 100%. And trying to do the right thing. And it's a lot different than when we started in this business, where we're just haphazardly taking shots at people that we don't know and aren't really thinking about the long-term consequences. So you want Drew Allar to have success, no doubt about it. And that actually leads me to this. I want to get your thoughts on this. Is this going to be a situation like Jim Harbaugh and J.J. McCarthy in terms of J.J.'s last year at Michigan? They didn't really ask him to do a bunch. And J.J. was one of the best interviews best kids I've ever talked to at the Combine. Got hurt last year, so he didn't play as a rookie. He's going to be the starter in Minnesota this year. But there were a ton of questions about him coming out because he was not asked to do a bunch on the team that won the national title, because everybody at every other position was a 4 or 5 star who played at their absolute best that season.
Yeah, I very much could see that. And how about this? Oh, man, I'm going to just roll out the candy here for all of our Penn State coworkers. Penn State looks like Michigan looked going into 2023. Ooh. Penn State looks like Ohio State looked going into 2024. Those are teams that were old. They had good culture. Players said no to the NFL. Like Jack Sawyer said no to the NFL draft so he could come back for another year at Ohio State. And they had a lot of other teammates that did the same. Michigan had players who said no to the NFL draft so that they could come back for another season. And what did it lead to? National championship, double-digit draft picks. National championship, double-digit draft picks. James Franklin said, we've got guys in that locker room that said, I don't want to be a 5th-round pick that was a part of the Big Ten runner-up. I want to be like a day 1 pick or a day 2 pick as part of a Big Ten champion. And so I think that we are setting up for a year again, where if you want Drew Allar to be going out there and throwing the ball 35 times a game, well, guess what? Penn State's probably not competing for a national title. So I think that very much could be that situation where, as our friend Tom Fernelli, he always used to call it 3rd and JJ. Right? Like it would be like 1st down, run the football, 2nd down, run the football, 3rd and JJ. JJ, go figure it out. I could see some similar situations here where Andy Kotelnicki, who apparently, you'll like this, they call him Coach K. So high bar for success. Like if Coach K dials it up, then I think Drew Allar should be able to rise to the occasion. But again, it's in those big games, in those tense moments when things break down, is he making the right decisions?
Yeah, and Fornelli's exactly right, because once you dug a little deeper on JJ's final year in Michigan, 3rd down is when he absolutely shined. He was one of the best players on 3rd and medium to long of anyone in college football that year, and part of why he got drafted. I think if Drew Allar replicates that, he's going to be on the road to success for sure. All right, here's my burning question, Chip. Another young man that decided to come back to school last year, and it worked out. Couldn't have gone better for him. Won a national title and was the second wide receiver drafted, Emeka Egbuka. And I think Emeka was a victim of just being really, really good at everything, but he wasn't Malik Neighbors. He wasn't Marvin Harrison Jr. All he's doing now is dominating Buccaneers camp. Baker Mayfield absolutely loves him. He's some fresh blood in a wide receiver room that's really good, but also a little older with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Are you at all surprised that Emeka's had this success so soon? And I would imagine my burning question is, can he be the best wide receiver in this class? He was taken second overall, but a lot of the draft pundits, myself included, had him going a little later in the first round. But are you at all surprised by this early success he's had? And I imagine it's going to parlay itself into a really good rookie season as well.
Yeah, let me jump on the surprise part, because that answer is no. He was, I believe, an early enrollee freshman with Marvin Harrison Jr. And I remember tuning in to watch that spring game when they're both, should have been going to their prom, but they're at Ohio State spring game. You're tuning in to watch Marvin Harrison Jr., this, crazy, highly rated recruit. And Emeka Egbuka was the best looking wide receiver in that spring game for Ohio State. So, whether it is playing with Marvin Harrison Jr., whether it's playing with Jeremiah Smith a year ago, the idea that he has been playing, he's going to be slotted alongside of Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, these established veterans. He's always been in kind of an iron sharpens iron type wide receiver room. He's not going to shrink in those situations. He's going to rise to the occasion. So that really doesn't surprise me at all. Now, in terms of how he stacks up against the rest of the wide receivers, that to me is going to depend on what is your expectation. Do I think he's going to have the most yards at the end of the year of these wide receivers? No. Do I think he's going to have the most touchdowns? Maybe also no. But if he is that missing piece of the puzzle for Tampa's passing attack, where they feel like he frees up, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, where other teams can't pay as much attention to him, he could be the most important. But I don't think that, because of the other wide receivers that are there, I do not expect Egbuka to be the most productive of the wide receivers from this draft class.
Yeah, we'll see. But Baker's couldn't be more excited, and the Buccaneers admitted they had him as a top 10 pick, and I wouldn't be surprised. I think he's better coming out, and I think Chris Olave went higher in the draft than Emeka did. I think Emeka's going to be one of the best Ohio State receivers to come out, and that includes Marvin Harrison Jr., of course, and Garrett Wilson just signed a huge deal and is a big part of what they do in New York. But we'll find out together. All right, when we come back, Chip, going to talk about what's that?
And Jackson Smith and Jigba too.
Yeah, no, I think so.
No, it's tough. It's tough. Soft tissue injuries. You kind of forget about that last year at Ohio State.
That's
it's
right. That's really right. Difficult. That's what you called them. I forgot about that. I think that's another Fornelliism. All right, let's take a quick break. We're going to talk about, when we get back on the other side, one of my favorite players last year, because Bud Elliott introduced him to us about 13 months ago. And I'm curious what his 2025 is going to look like. LSU quarterback Garrett Nussmeier. We'll talk about that right after this break. All right, Chip, making great news here. CBS Sports Network, and with the first pick history, we have a graphic that includes the words whoopsie daisy, and that is part of your burning question. Has Garrett Nussmeier, LSU quarterback, who might have come out last year had he finished strong and been a first-round pick, has he found a cure for the whoopsie daisies?
I talk to people around LSU, and they rave about Garrett Nussmeier's arm talent, just the way that he looks and all the skills. And they just look at me like, man, but sometimes he just, I don't know. And that's why it's the whoopsie daisies. And our friend Tom Fornelli has a statistic called the whoopsie daisy rate. And let me tell you that with 12 interceptions, which led the SEC last year, Garrett Nussmeier's whoopsie-daisy rate was not good. And in particular, Garrett Nussmeier's whoopsie-daisy rate was not good in some very big games. We're talking 3 interceptions against Texas A&M. We're talking 2 interceptions against Alabama. We're talking 2 interceptions against Ole Miss. Too many of these mistakes are happening against LSU's toughest opponents. And that's why I'm actually bullish on Garrett Nussmeier going into 2025, because that is the easiest thing to me for him to be able to improve, because we can't really hope that a quarterback can improve their arm talent too much, or we can't improve mechanics, but so much in the college game with as little time as they spend with coaches. But if we can get him to just make the decision-making, get a little bit sharper, then, man, we could see this really improve. I mean, 29 touchdowns, 12 interceptions a year ago. If you can cut that thing down by half in terms of the interceptions, add a couple touchdowns, we're talking about a potential Heisman Trophy contender, and we're talking about LSU as an SEC title contender. So it's not just the fact that he led the SEC with 12 interceptions. It's also the fact that so many of them were against LSU's biggest opponents. If he can find a cure for the whoopsie daisies, then we could be talking about the top quarterback in the draft, the Heisman Trophy. All of those things are on the table for Nuss.
Yeah, Nuss is my QB1 as we sit here, discounting Arch Manning coming out. I'm just going to assume that Arch comes back until we hear otherwise. One of the games you didn't mention that's fresh in my mind, because I watched it a lot last year because of the defensive players this team had, South Carolina. He had some god-awful interceptions in the red zone in that game, in addition to the games that you mentioned. And as I mentioned, your co-host of Cover 3, Bud Elliott, turned us on to Garrett back last May, right after the last year's draft. And the first half of the season, I thought he was as good as he could have been, given that he was a first-year starter. And the second half of the season is very much the reason he returned to LSU, I would imagine. And as you were going through your explanation for Nussmeier's 2024 season, it sort of mirrored my comp for him. When he's on, he could be Joe Burrow. When he's off, he is Jacksonville Jaguars Mac Jones. Like, you just don't know which guy you're going to get. And if you get closer to Joe Burrow, you're a first-round pick. If you get closer to Jacksonville Jaguars Mac Jones, you're going to be teaching tennis at some country club somewhere, because your NFL future is going to be a bleak one. But he looks like a coach's son. His dad's currently the OC of the Saints. He was at Philadelphia before that, was drafted as a quarterback, Doug Nussmeier. And I loved a lot of what he did last year. So I'm with you. Hopefully he can put it together. I want to mention one of his former teammates last year, my burning question, in addition to a couple other guys here that you know quite well. For the New England Patriots, their drafts historically in the last 4 or 5 years have been up or down, mostly down. They got Drake May last year, home run. Can Will Campbell, this year's first-round pick at LSU left tackle, Trevion Henderson, their second-round pick, the running back, and Kyle Williams, third-round pick out of Washington State, can those guys end a recent string of horrible drafts for the Patriots? And more importantly, can they contribute? Mike Vrabel's now the head coach there, and we know exactly what Trey Henderson can do at Ohio State. He was there with Quinshawn and Chip Kelly in that offense that won the national title. And Kyle Williams had a good season last season. Year before that, he was catching passes for Cam Ward. But I'll ask you about Will Campbell in particular, Chip, because the knock on him was that he had short arms coming out. No one knew that until over 3 years of playing as a starter every year at LSU. No one had any concerns about his short arms until they were measured. I think he's going to be an absolute godsend for Drake May. What are your thoughts on what Will Campbell can do? And then what Trey Henderson adds to an offense that has been mostly stale in recent years?
Yeah, first on Campbell, I'm not going to get too caught up in that. There's all kinds of offensive linemen that as they're making the transition to the next level, people think that, they might not fit into the prototypical positions. I believe that I remember some people talking about Rashawn Slater, like he would never make it as a left tackle, as he was going to be a guard or a right tackle. And sure enough, he signs a massive deal here recently to be the cornerstone of that offensive line. So for Will Campbell, I'm not going to be scared. I'm going to trust what I saw. That guy is just, as soon as he stepped out on the field in Baton Rouge, he was going to be someone who played with the nastiness. He understands the game, and he has a lot of the size that you're still looking for. Trevion Henderson is so fun, because one of the things that I think he will provide for this Patriots offense is something that it isn't necessarily, it doesn't jump off. It might have for you, but his ability to catch passes out of the backfield and make plays in the open field was massive. And I think that when you're looking at a Patriots team that is trying to put in those building blocks, the fact that he can not also be an effective runner, but be some of that safety valve and be effective when he does get into the open field. Trevion Henderson, maybe a sneaky dual threat running back, because, he shared that backfield with Quinshawn Judkins, who also could make some of those same plays. They've had a deep running back room at Ohio State for a while now. But I think that for Trevion Henderson, that is, as he makes the jump to the pros, like, what are you going to love about him? Well, I don't think he's like truly a special down-to-down traditional running back, but his versatility, I think, is a little bit overlooked.
Yeah, and there was some buzz late in the draft process that he might even sneak into the first round. Amari Hampton out of UNC went in the first round to the Chargers. But in terms of Trey Henderson, one of the things that Josh McDaniels said he loves about him already through the first week or so of training camp, his ability to catch the ball and his ability to block. It's not super sexy. Again, it's not going to be Bijan Robinson or Saquon Barkley, but he seems to be doing the right thing, play in and play out. And I'll mention quickly Kyle Williams. I hope he busts out. Like, I wasn't a big Kyle Williams fan coming into the draft, but Chip, I'm going to mention this until something changes. I was dumbfounded that the Patriots traded down in last year's draft to take Jalen Polk and pass on Ladd McConkey, who absolutely dominated as a rookie in LA with the Chargers. Jalen Polk is struggling. He's not even in the top 4 wide receiver conversation right now. Kyle Williams is. We'll see how that works out. But those 3 guys, if they hit on those picks, I honestly think the Patriots could win more games than they lose. It might be 9. I don't know, but I think with Vrabel, Drake May, and a good draft class, they could be able to turn the corner. I'm going to take a break here, but when we come back, and you and I talked about this with Tom and Rand when we did our early mock draft about all the Clemson guys that could potentially be first-round picks, and there are a ton of them. And I want to get to your burning question about this group, which includes, of course, Cade Klubnik, and we'll talk about that right after this break. All right, let's keep this burning question train going, Chip. And this is your next one up, and it's a good one. I'll ask you this. I'm going to add my burning question subtweet here. Your burning question: will Clemson's projected first rounders play like first rounders? And I'll give you the guys that I currently have as first round picks based on our summer scouting. T.J. Parker, Peter Woods, both play along the defensive line. Antonio Williams is one of my favorite players in this class so far at wide receiver. Avion Terrell, A.J. Terrell's brother, is the corner. Cade Klubnik, is he going to be a first-round pick? There's a lot of buzz about him. Blake Miller is not a first-round pick for me, but I don't know if you're including him or not, and either way is fine. He's going to be in that conversation. So those are the first-rounders we're talking about, unless you have some guys to add. And my subtweet is any way, shape, or form Dabo Swinney on any sort of hot seat, or is it just a matter of him getting back to the form we saw when he was winning those national titles?
What? What? No. No. Okay. So we had a mailbag question about who is the most infallible king on campus. Dabo Swinney is Dabo Swinney and Kirby Smart are like the 2 that are just untouchable right now, both with 2 national championships in the college football playoff era. Look, the thing that stands out to me about this is right now, on paper, when you look at the NFL draft talent and you listed them right there, that is what Clemson had when they won the national championship in 2016, when they won the national championship in 2018, when they were the national runner-up playing for the title in 15 and 19. I mean, that run from 2015 to 2020 was just like always having wide receivers, always having defensive linemen. You know, hey, Avion, where'd you come from? Oh, AJ, that's right. The other Clemson defensive back that went on to go on to the NFL draft. So on paper, this is the makeup for a team to not just be ACC good, because look, the 2022 Clemson Tigers were ACC good. They won the ACC. Congratulations. You could argue that the 2024 Clemson Tigers won the ACC, but then they got to the college football playoff. They didn't win a game. If we're going to really climb back to the top of the mountain, which is where the Clemson football program was between 2015 and 2020, well, then they need to have all of those projected first rounders play like first rounders on Saturdays. And this is what I love. This is like Dabo. Now that Saban's out the game, Dabo sometimes is our rat poison guy. He came out first media day and he's like, I see all y'all talking about these mock drafts, but I'll tell you what, those defensive linemen gave up 300 yards rushing to the Citadel at the end of last year. We couldn't get off the field against South Carolina. If they're going to be first-round picks, they got to start playing like first-round picks. And there's something to that because Peter Woods has been a 5-star, big body, played 7A football in the state of Alabama. His future as being a potential first-round pick has always been there. T.J. Parker flashed as a true freshman. You saw the athleticism as an edge rusher, great for the modern game. But look, they could probably still be first-round picks, even if they don't play like first-round picks. My burning question is for Clemson to achieve all that it can achieve this season, they've got to play like surefire first-round picks.
Yeah, and I think it starts with Cade Klubnik, who I thought started slow and got better as the season went on. He had the reverse Garrett Nussmeier year in 2024. Our buddy Rand Carthon was out there in Vegas with him and a bunch of other players. And it's going to be interesting to see how tall he measures and how much he weighs. He's a tough kid. He has great touch on intermediate and deep balls. He's a better athlete than maybe we give him credit for. I just want to see how all this stuff comes together for him. But it starts with just winning games in the fall, and then we can figure the rest out. All right, here's my burning question, Chip. It has to do with Travis Hunter and his usage on both sides of the ball, which is we've been talking about pretty much since he left Jackson State for Colorado. Our buddy Pete Prisco sat down with Travis. Let's hear what he has to say there, producer Striker.
How many plays do you think you could play? You think you could play them all?
Yeah, I definitely think I could play them all. If I didn't think I could play them all, I wouldn't be trying to do it.
But what makes you able to do that? Nobody's ever done that. What makes you capable of doing that? Just
my mental. You got to have the right mindset going into it. You got to have the right knowledge. You got to understand what you're doing when you're going out there. You got to understand how to take care of your body too.
What's tougher for you, playing cornerback or playing wide receiver?
Neither. Just got to go out there and execute.
If I'm covering you and I'm a DB, what is my biggest worry when I have to cover you?
The ball in the air.
Because you don't drop anything.
Yeah, I'm going to get it.
And then on the other side, if I'm against you matched up, what's my biggest worry?
The ball in the air. I'm going to get it.
Chip, we've been having this conversation forever. So a couple things. Trevor Lawrence has said he's never seen a better conditioned athlete in his life. The quarterback for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Liam Cohen, the head coach, the first-year head coach, has said that we're going to ease him in on both sides. He'll practice on offense one day and maybe 2 days, and then on defense the other. Mostly more offense because he's not quite as technically sound there as he is on defense. Not to say he's not the best athlete on the field because we've all seen this together, but he played 100-plus snaps every single week in Colorado. He did have the injury 2 years ago in Colorado State on that cheap shot. He was banged up last year with a shoulder for a little bit, I believe. Realistically, if the average NFL game is 60 plays from each side of the ball, how many plays can we put Travis Hunter out there? Because I feel like if we keep moving the goalposts closer and closer to 100.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, like the way that y'all do it in the National Football League with these short, easy games and all these less snaps and the clock stays running. I mean, sure, like he should be able to do it. I mean, he should be able to play more. Come on. We're talking about the modern NFL. Look, to me, it's always situational, and it really was situational a lot of times with Travis Hunter in terms of his time at Colorado. You could be out there on the field and, you could know that it's not going to go your way. There are ways for you to be able to build a game plan if he really wants to play all of those snaps. I think that anytime, again, kidding aside, the exposure to hits is always going to be something you're going to be concerned about, especially as the game gets faster and more violent with the transition to the next level. But we're talking about a true unicorn. I mean, that's why he was the superstar that he was last season, because even in situational moments, he delivered game-changing and game-winning plays. He's just that kind of a special athlete. So if he's ready to go, I would not put a governor on him.
I'm coming around. I'm sort of with you. Like you talk about showing up in big moments. We all made the point that he weighs, it feels like he weighs $110 soaking wet. He had that huge hit at the goal line in that Baylor game, in that game they ended up winning in the last throw of the game from Shedeur. We know what he can do in terms of catching the ball. The North Dakota State game, some of those end zone catches are still hard to wrap your brain around. And you talk to anyone around him, he loves two things, football and fishing. And he wasn't fishing in that segment with Pete, so he's playing football, and he seems locked in on that. I sort of understand why they traded up to get him from 5 to 2 and gave up everything they did, because if he's even 60% of what they hope, it feels like a grand slam, especially after how well Brian Thomas Jr. did last year and surprised some people, myself included, as that rookie wide receiver. The other thing before we take a break, I'll ask you this. What do you think about this? I heard someone float this theory the other day, and I don't necessarily hate it. I need to think more about it. But let's say week 1, you're playing a team that has really good defensive backs or really good wide receivers, and you just have him playing primarily defense. The next week, they're weak on defense, and you need to ramp up the offense, so you have him playing primarily offense. Could you see more of a weak-centric game plan for Travis as opposed to just 85-15 separation on any given game day? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense, but I would keep him I would not change it from a week-to-week basis, especially in his rookie year when you want to establish a little bit of a rhythm. I would make it a lot more of the like third down and red zone. Like I don't know what the NFL practice week is like, but on Thursdays in college football, those are your third down and red zone days at practice. And I think that, if you were going to have, let's put them in all of our third down and red zone stuff. Okay. Let's look at maybe you ramp up something based on a matchup where you're trying to take advantage of somebody or you need a little bit of extra help on the defensive side. But I would not go all offense one week, all defense the next week, just to keep the rhythms, even not just for Travis, but for Travis's teammates. Because Travis is that type of player, because of his football IQ, because of Travis Hunter's football instincts, he might break off. He might break off a route, or he might all of a sudden think, I can go make a play on this ball. That's where you start to impact all the players around you as well. I would want to establish as much continuity as possible. If we are going to be limiting his participation, I would rather it be consistent from week to week rather than all offense one week, all defense the next week, matchup specific.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. That's probably, I need to calm myself with that theory there. I think yours is a little better well prepared.
All right, not a robot. I know it feels like he's a robot, but it's like
it does.
We can't just pull him off the fantasy bench and put him in the fantasy lineup and now his points count this week. We got it's a human sport. We got to make sure we get rhythms and routines.
It's so funny, Chip, because throughout the draft process and even the first 2 weeks after the draft, I was like, listen, we can't have him out there more than 60 snaps a game. Now I'm like, you know what? Let's get closer to 90 and we'll see. We'll figure it out. He speaks with such confidence, and you watch him, and you're like, okay, he can do it. He's done it before. The injury thing's real. We get that, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. All right, let's take one more break when we come back. I can't believe it's taken until the last block to talk about this team, which historically the last 20 years has been one of the best teams in college football. Alabama Crimson Tide in a post-Nick Saban world. Can they bounce back? And it's going to start along the offensive defensive lines, and Chip will tell us about that right after this break. All right, Chip, I've unofficially counted 7 offensive defensive linemen from Alabama that were first or second round picks going back to the last 4 NFL drafts. And your burning question is a pretty simple one. Can Alabama bounce back, and can it start along the offensive line, or the lines of scrimmage, offense and defense? You mentioned Caden Proctor, Tim Keenan, LT Overton, and more. Quarterback situation appears to be Ty Simpson, but it starts up front. What do you think?
I'm just thinking that we might be headed towards just a year where Alabama aesthetically kind of mashes you. I mean, big bodies still matter, and that kind of gets me going, because when you get Kalen DeBoer in there after all the success that he had with Michael Penix at Washington, you think about Rome Odunze and high-flying offenses, but even though you've got Ryan Williams out there on the perimeter, I think that this Alabama team can be an SEC title contender thanks to just having old, big guys along the lines of scrimmage. And so as I was scanning some of the, early NFL draft commentary, seeing that Tim Keenan, LT Overton, even Deontay Lawson at the linebacker position, Caden Proctor has been a potential NFL draft pick ever since he showed up. But I would even throw, I don't know if he's on your radar right now, but Parker Brailsford, the center at Alabama, is a junior who I just think he's not going to blow you away with his size, but man, that guy plays so well. And he actually started at Washington, ended up transferring to Alabama. I believe it was a all SEC center for the Crimson Tide last year. In an era where we continue to be infatuated by your star quarterback and your wide open offenses, what if Ty Simpson is just fine, but what if Alabama is elite along the lines of scrimmage? That to me seems like a path for the Crimson Tide to not have to be spending, Selection Sunday hoping that they get picked as an at-large team. That to me is a path for Alabama to get back to Atlanta playing for the SEC championship in early December.
Yeah, I mean, you make a lot of really good points. Caden Proctor is my number 1 offensive tackle throughout the summer. Tim Keenan was number 5 on Rand Carthon's list among the defensive tackles. I think LT Overton has a chance to be a first-round pick. You mentioned Parker Brailsford, who might weigh 290, but I think he plays like he's 325 in terms of the force and power with which he plays. Yeah. No, because I was skeptical when I saw how much he weighed, and then you watch him like, okay, I get it. And your other point, you talked about a transfer from Washington. Kalen DeBoer is not afraid to draft and develop or to recruit and develop offensive linemen. They had Rosengarten, who was the second-round pick of the Ravens. They had Fautani, who was a first-round pick of the Steelers. They had Brailsford, who came over with him to Tuscaloosa. And I would imagine that Michael Penix Jr. appreciated the fact that he had those offensive linemen there. And I think it's going to be – the quarterback thing is going to be interesting. But we just talked about J.J. McCarthy and the way he won at Michigan, the way Drew Allar may have to win at Penn State, how Will Howard won last year at Ohio State. You're not always going to have Joe Burrow under center, so that could be fun. Speaking of quarterbacks, I want to get to my burning question real quick here, Chip. We spent a lot of time, and you guys did as well, talking about Shedeur Sanders the last 2 years at Colorado and all the things that he was able to accomplish and overcome. And I think, like me, you may have been shocked that he fell to the 5th round. I thought, worst case, maybe he goes to the Steelers in the late first, end up going 5th round overall. So now he's QB4 in Cleveland. They have a ton of questions in terms of what that quarterback room is going to look like. He's been getting more and more reps with the non-third team, and he's been doing pretty well. And he feels like he's going to be a developmental quarterback. I'll ask you this before I talk about Quinshon Judkins, and who is yet to sign, the only player not signed in this draft class. Do you think maybe this ends up being best case scenario for Shedeur, that there's zero pressure? He might even be behind Dylan Gabriel this year, the 3rd-round pick, and he can just ease his way into whatever comes next without having the pressure of being a day-one starter, where ultimately it may be what looks to be an Anthony Richardson situation where he's being set up to fail?
Yeah, well, over-editorializing and making it very clear that I am not an NFL expert, let me say that, no, I do not think being on the Cleveland Browns is the best-case scenario for anybody. You're not going to talk me into that. However, if you rip off the helmet logo and you just say, no, is Shedeur Sanders going to be set up better by being a developmental quarterback? Then sure, because he got so much better from when he was at Jackson State to the end of his career at Colorado. I think that he continues to be able to find ways to use his advantages, which to me is mental advantages. I think he sees the field really well, but sometimes needs to figure out, when you can do the gas, when you can do the brakes, when do you need to throw it away, or when you can hold on to it just a little bit longer to make another play. So I think there's going to be an adjustment period to where if they needed him to be a day one starter, it probably would not work out, or I would not bet on it working out. So I could see that working out for overall big picture. I could see it being better than if he was a number 3 overall pick and thrust into starting week 1. I could see that transition being a little rough. So I'll agree with you there.
Yeah. And, hindsight and all that, because, there were conversations that he might go to the Giants at number 3, in which case he probably would have been forced into the starting job. And that may not end up being best for him. We'll see. Another player I want to mention who was part of the Travis Hunter trade, Quinshon Judkins, 2nd-round pick that the Browns got. They took him 36 overall, had a domestic issue. He is not signed with the team. He's going to be facing some legal consequences once we get to that point of the conversation. I don't know what the Browns are going to do to replace him because they're pretty thin. They have Dylan Sampson, who they drafted in the 4th round. They have Jerome Ford. So I'm not quite sure what this is going to look like, because that would go a long way in helping whoever the quarterback is going to be. Kevin Stefanski is a huge run game guy. If I give you 30 seconds, can you give me sort of his role at Ohio State last year and what the Browns maybe end up missing should they not have him this year?
Yeah, again, like somebody who's versatile, a little bit dynamic. You can work him into a lot of different stuff. Not the blocker that you got when you with Travion Henderson, but certainly maybe a little bit higher into explosivity. But I'll say, don't sleep on Dylan Sampson. That guy had the Tennessee offense on his back last year, and he answered the call every single time. He's not going to blow you away with some of his raw tools, but he's got that edge to him. So if he does get thrust into a bigger role because of whatever happens with Quinshon, Sampson's ready to go.
I love that. I'll ask you this quickly. This is from producer Striker. Who has more wins this year, the Cleveland Browns or Danny Cannell's Florida State Seminoles?
Let's see. Are the Cleveland Browns going to win 7 games?
No.
Oh, okay. Florida State. Florida State's going to be a very solid 7-5, 8-4. They'll be fine.
Okay. Well, there you go. I cannot thank you enough, Chip, for joining us. You did 2 straight hours of network television today, and I always love having you on the podcast with us. In the meantime, check out With the First Pick wherever you get your podcast. Scan that QR code. We'll be back next week with some more summer scouting. We'll see you guys in the next one.